as Darwin is obviously preparing now for this second plane load of evacuees to arrive. They've got to get clearance, though, and that is expected to be midnight in Hong Kong for that aeroplane to then make its way to Wuhan and come back here to Australia. So no doubt Sky News will be right across all of those developments into your Sunday morning. But there's a lot here within the coronavirus situation still to discuss, and I will take you first and foremost now to the Sunday Age, where this picture splash says "End of the Ride." It's by Chip Legrand, and it says that Keith Sanders was floating with Chinese tourists above the green hills of the Yarra Valley, his hot air balloon drifting through the early morning air when Beijing deemed that to help contain the coronavirus, all group trips from China would ease. By the time that his balloon touched down, one of the 10 that Saunders runs as the owner of Global Ballooning Australia, a poster child business for Australia's engagement with the fast-growing Chinese tourist market, he had lost $100,000 worth of bookings. And it's a similar story as well that is carried across the Sunday Mail. This is the Adelaide edition of the Sunday Mail, an SOS for deserted Chinatown, and it reads, fears about contracting coronavirus are wreaking financial havoc on Adelaide's Chinatown as several shops have already shut. More are expected to follow in coming days, despite SA Health yesterday saying that the popular Googers Street precinct is a safe place to visit. Adelaide City Council member Simon Hugh said that traders who relied mostly on Chinese customers were reporting downturns of up to 80%, with those who had mixed clientele down between 30 to 40%. Mike, we know that coronavirus, and we'll come to a few of the other issues with coronavirus as well in a moment, because there's a lot of new developments in the last 24 hours or so, is going to have, though, on the Australian tourism, particularly with Chinese tourists backing out of holiday arrangements here to Australia. This is already showing the devastating impacts, and people are going to be losing their jobs.
Indeed. It is truly an economic disaster, and of course you're talking about trying to arrange the flights to expedite those people back home again, and it's a logistical nightmare, but it's very real. And I've read a few comments about the psychological effect of this. I know a Chinese woman, and she's been living most of her life in Australia. She's a successful businesswoman. She wouldn't go to Chinese New Year for fear that there may be other Chinese people there with the virus. There is a suburb of Sydney which has a large Chinese population. She won't go there to see her friends. Whether it's an overreaction, but who could blame people for being ultra cautious? But it's costing a lot of money. This is having a big, big impact, and not a lot of it good so far.
And Corin, the unintended consequences, as we have seen the weather systems move through New South Wales with flash flooding and the like, there was a story today reported in the Daily Telegraph that 4 SES workers turned up to assist a New South Wales resident who was self-quarantining for the fact that they had been in China for their holidays. So they were at home for the next 14 days. The question's being asked, and probably rightfully being asked, well, what about those 4 SES workers? Should they have gone into the house? Should they not have gone into the house? And as I say, this is just one of those unintended consequences. Absolutely.
And as you say, these emergency workers have enough to deal with already. It's just a story that is, it's a snowball and it's heading in the wrong direction, isn't it? You know, there's so many question marks around this. It doesn't seem like we have been given all of the information up front, to be honest. I'm sure there will be people who were offered the chance to get out of Wuhan who refused or declined at that point, who are regretting that decision now. There's a lot it sounds like there's a lot of misinformation and fear-mongering and scaremongering running rife on social media. It's one of those times where there's a real media responsibility to report the truths around this, but there's a lot of misinformation, especially around how the virus is spreading. So I can understand why some of the parents were saying that they were going to take their children out of school, but there needs to be really, really clear information fast as soon as people have got it. You know, we can't control what the Chinese authorities are going to do, but we can try to allay fears at this end. I'm just really sceptical about this whole home isolation and, you know, what are they calling it?
Quarantining.
Yeah, that's it, self-quarantine. I mean, that whole concept, it sounds very dubious to me. And I think, as we can see from those SES workers, it's like someone really hasn't thought this through, and it doesn't feel like a disaster plan is being successfully managed at this point. But I think it's still an unfolding story, isn't it? There's still so many questions. We don't have the answers. We don't really know what we're dealing with, I don't think, still.
Corin, can I suggest that this home quarantining actually might be reasonably sensible? I mean, if you've got a child and your child comes down with an infection, you don't send the child to school and spread it around the rest of the class. You say, no, you've got to stay home for however many days it is until the cold or the flu or whatever it is the child has got clears up. So staying at home seems to me a sensible sort of and very easy to handle sort of quarantining.
Yeah, but 14 days, I just think, because there is so much misinformation and there's so many question marks out there, and some people aren't taking it seriously, some people have gone to the other extreme and Matt, you've seen some pictures probably on social media of people on planes with huge, almost tents that they're putting over themselves, you know, one step further than a mask. But the whole self-quarantining for 14 days, that's a huge amount of trust. You know, it is someone just going down to the shops and not thinking too much of it. I think it's a bit different when a child is sick in bed. When we're talking about people of all ages, it's a huge amount of personal responsibility that I think could come back and bite us.
But well, the questions that still are being asked as well, and some of those people who are on board that ship, that Princess Cruises ship off Japan at the moment, if they then return to Australia, they're asking the questions, will they have to then self-quarantine as well when they return to Australia for 14 days? Other ship cruise liners at the moment, including Royal Caribbean and Norwegian, have said if you are from China, if you're from Hong Kong, if you are from Macau, then you're not welcome on our ships. And then we saw this example today as well, I think we have, of a tweet outside of the Albury Harvey Norman. And the owner of, or the franchisee of this particular Harvey Norman, has been told to remove the sign because it read, "No coronavirus in our mattresses as ours are Australian made." So there is still so much here, Mike Jeffries, in regards to not only the information and ensuring that this information is timely and it's distributed to all Australians, whether or not those people who are on board that ship, will they have to be quarantined when they get back to Australia? And there are also so many stories as well, Mike. I'm aware that you've been having a look at ABC News in the United States in regards to where the coronavirus actually originated.
Well, the fact of the matter is that this really is providing a field day for the conspiracy theorists. But as they will tell you, well, if it comes true, it's not just a theory. And I think, you know, those of us who are in this business would be aware of what's out there and some of the stories that are circulating. But I did think it was interesting, Ollie, that a mainstream outfit like ABC, the big television conglomerate in the US, is running this story that the White House is requesting scientists to investigate where this virus came from in the first place, as much, they say, as anything, to debunk the fact that it might have been a deliberate artificial pathogen that was going to be used for weapons purposes. Well, of course, that's what's doing the rounds, and I'm certainly not one to add to conspiracy theories, but I do think it's worth noting that an organisation like ABC is carrying this story from the White House, requesting that they get the full story, because, you know, I agree with Corinne. I just feel that we haven't been told the full story in a timely manner, and obviously a lot of other people, whether it's justified or not, have that exact same feeling, and it has to be put to rest.
Yeah, and speaking of those people on board that particular cruise ship, there are even some of them indicating that they want the Australian government to intervene. They want them to say, bring us home and bring us home right now.